Welcome, everyone, to the MMA Happy Hour podcast. I am Kyle Anthony, your host for today. We are talking UFC Qatar, headlined by Arman Tsarukyan and Dan Hooker. We're going to be breaking down 4 plays here on the show today. Now, last weekend, man, we were hitting bets. We were feeling good. Islam by points. We had Carlos Prates by knockout. We had BSD. We were hitting bets, and the one that I really wanted to hit was Sean Brady, and boy, I thought he'd get those takedowns. He didn't. Credit to Morales there. He landed the big shot. Brady had no chance there. I really thought the wrestling would get going a little bit. He was terrified of the power, but we move on to this weekend with only 3 UFC events left in 2025. So I'm planning on winning all 3 of these. We're finishing the year strong. All 3 of these profitable evenings. So we will be locked in for this weekend. If you want to become a client, link down in the description. Already have plays up, locked in for clients. Check it out, as well as our Caesars Sportsbook offer for new users down below. Just bet $1. You get 20 profit boosts up to $25 each. Now, with that being said, let's dive into the main event of the evening between Arman Tsarukyan and Dan Hooker. Now, you got Arman sitting around minus 500 on the comeback here. We have Dan Hooker plus 375. Now, Arman represents that new era, that new breed of fighter, right? We kind of know what we're getting out of this guy, and we kind of know that this is really just how the sport is evolving. The sport is changing. These guys are just well-rounded, extremely well-rounded. They're good everywhere. They're really just not focusing on one discipline. They're really rounding out their skill set. And Arman, no different here, where he has elite level wrestling and really does have solid striking. He's got a good kicking arsenal. He's definitely strong, can move forward, land some nice shots. And you are seeing that he is continuing to evolve, continuing to get better with his striking overall. Now, Dan Hooker, I would say he represents the old school here where, this guy's tough. There's no doubt. He's put on some really absolute wars throughout his career. And he's a guy that's just willing to scrap and fight with anybody. He just doesn't really care. He'll take short notice fights, bad matchups. It doesn't matter. This guy's always willing to throw down. Now, he has fought, high level guys throughout his career, just a laundry list of just high level fighters back to back to back, pretty much again throughout this guy's career. Now, overall, though, he is on a nice 3-0-1 recently. Now, that has looked good for him overall here, but the thing that you kind of look at, and I think the first thing here is really the MMA mileage, and I do think that is going to be a big, big concern here. Plus, over his last 3 fights, 2 of them were by split decision. Very close fights. A Gamrot fight, Jalen Turner, very, very close. Did edge it out there for Dan Hooker, but, very, very close fights. But the MMA mileage and 22 UFC fights is just, it's tough. It's tough to kind of, get past that when you're now 36 years old, and it's just not going to get easier for him. The decline, I think, is there for him here. Maybe we're already seeing it. Maybe we're starting to see it, but the decline, I think, is starting to really appear here. And also, you've got to look at it that the guy's been dealing with a lot of injuries. Over the last 3-4 years, he's had about 3 different injuries: an arm, a hand. He broke his hand, needed surgery not even that long ago. And these are the things where it's very concerning, even if you're trying to find some value here on Dan Hooker. It's a tough situation where you've got a guy that kind of the body is depleting. It's deteriorating as we're seeing it here. And not only the fact that the body is deteriorating for Dan Hooker, but it's all the fact that this is a bad stylistic matchup for him. I think a very bad. And although Dan does have a 78% takedown defense rate, he can be taken down. He can be controlled. We saw him even against Gamrot, had 5 takedowns, 5 minutes of control time. We did even see Islam took him down once, finished him. I know that's Islam, but still, the opening and the path, I do think is really there. Obviously, the line is indicating that as well. But I do think that, not to get too deep into this fight, because I think it really just comes down to the wrestling. I really do think that Arman's wrestling is just too damn good. I think that he's going to be able to move forward. He's going to be able to, mix up some of the striking, because Dan's going to be worried about the takedowns. And I think that once he's down, the top control's there, the heavy ground and pound that Arman does land, I think it's going to be there. He's more explosive. He's going to be the better athlete between these 2 fighters. And I do think all of those things kind of set it up very badly for Dan Hooker overall. And I do think that the wrestling here, he dominates, but also the fact that this is not a striker versus grappler type of matchup here. And I do think that Arman competes on the feet, if not land some big shots on the feet. And again, the worry of the takedowns will open up shots for him. And I do think that he's going to be able to get the wrestling going and also land some of those big shots. And where I'm going with this here is I do think that this fight does end inside the distance here. And out of the 12 career losses for Dan Hooker, 6 come inside the distance. Over his last 5 losses, 4 are inside the distance here. I do think this finish materializes here. So you've got Arman at -500. You get Arman inside the distance at -140. I think it's a great spot here. I think it's a generous number in a 5-rounder. I don't think this fight gets to the scorecards. So give me Arman Tsarukyan by inside the distance, -140. And the next one here we're going to talk about is going to be Ian Garry. He is -270 on the comeback here. We have Belal Muhammad. He is +220. Now, you got Ian Garry here, who is really an elite level striker. I know everybody can't stand this guy, but he is definitely an elite level fighter when you're looking at just his body of work, how he moves out there. He's got solid footwork. He's got, great range, great distance management. He can mix it up very well, different stance switching, giving different looks to his opponent. And that's what's made it very difficult for some of these guys to kind of get a beat on him, because he's just going to pop, pop, pop shots, move to the outside, throw a leg kick, mix it up a little bit, get back on his bike, skating on the outside, and then move back in. And at times, guys just can't get a good read on him. Where you look at Belal Muhammad, we know we're getting this guy also, it's going to be the wrestling. He's going to look to push that pace, get in your face, and be relentless with it, utilize his cardio. And also, he's another guy that has, increases boxing. Now, he's no Canelo hands, but, if you look back and you watch some of his past fights, it's definitely elevated from some of the really sloppy striking that he used to have. But the big question here is, will Belal get down and keep down Ian? And that's something where I lean to yes. I lean there's going to be happening. I think anybody who kind of thinks that he won't get him down at all, and that Garry can just kind of work at range the whole time, not get taken down once, I think it's going to be interesting. The other interesting part here is that, just recently, again, Belal being Belal, had just stated that, he's at a podcast that he's saying, hey, I'm going to look to outstrike Ian Garry. I'm going to look to work on the feet. I'm going to outbox him. I'm going to stay in his face. And it's just dumb. It's just some of the dumbest things that we have said. This is also why a lot of people couldn't stand this guy as champion, is because the dumb things that he's saying. I mean, obviously he didn't fight to an optimal game plan against JDM. It's pretty clear. I mean, even though he did have 9 takedowns, probably I would say half were not even real shots. They were pretty much shots that just try to get JDM to react, to sprawl, and then he could land the shot, land some shots up top, and that was kind of the mix-in that he was looking to do, keep him off balance, work from that, land some shots, and he wasn't really able to do that. And then once he started really pushing the wrestling heavy later, it was too late. He took a beating, and this is a 3-rounder. He needs to push that kind of wrestling pace. If he wants any kind of success here, he's much slower. He's way less dynamic than Ian Garry in this spot here. And it's almost like in a football game, right? If a team is in the Super Bowl, because, Belal was just in a championship fight and decided to do this, but if like a football team and saying, hey, listen, we have elite level passing game, let's just run the entire game and prove a point. And let's, in a championship game, that's the kind of dumb thing that he does. So it's hard to trust Belal when he's saying these stupid things. But I do think this is a spot here where I do think Belal can win a round and can survive. And that's where I'm going with here. I'm going Belal +3.5, which is -135. I think it's a good number here where Belal can win 1 round and get on the judges' scorecards. And those are unfamiliar with it, it's basically, the +3.5 is basically buying points on the judges' scorecard. It comes down to basically if he wins 1 round on all judges' scorecards and still loses the decision, 29-28, you still win that bet. And I think that's what happens here. I think Belal, again, if he fights to an optimal game plan here, can get some wrestling going. And I think even if he can't get it going for all 3 rounds, which I don't think he's going to do that. I don't think he's going to just wash him on the ground, but I do think he's going to be able to, at least at one point in the first or second round, probably, get around, because I think he's going to be able to push the pace. If he gets the takedown and he does get control time, I don't think Garry gets up. I think Garry is scrappy. I think he has some good get-ups, but I do think that Belal is going to have that strength and physicality advantage where he's going to be able to get the takedown. He's going to be able to push him up against the fence. He's going to get control time. And it could be one round where he says, hey, you know, I got you down, maybe 3 minutes that he's pretty much has control time, and maybe Garry gets back to his feet, lands some shots, but you're probably going to give that to Belal because of control time, top control, landing on him a little bit here, some ground and pound, maybe threaten to submission, and he's going to get it. And yet I think Belal might lose on the scorecards here. So I think that is going to push this here closer. Plus, Ian is a point fighter. You know, I don't put him as a guy that's going to go out there and just absolutely spark him out. I don't think that happens. I think it would have to be, you know, death by accumulation where he lands a lot of shots and then finally, you know, maybe puts him away later. But I think that Belal is going to have the durability to at least push through some of this. He's going to have to push the pace, get some takedowns. Out of Ian's last 4 victories, all are by decision. And I just think that, you know, even in the kicking game, I think that there's a spot here that if Ian's throwing some kicks, Belal can get a well-timed takedown. Again, if he's looking for it, I do believe it's a little bit of talk. I do think that he's going to have, this is a big, big fight for him. You know, Belal needs this here now at 37 years old. The age gap obviously is wide here, but I'm going Belal Muhammad plus 3.5 at minus 135. Next one here we're going to talk about is going to be Volkan Oezdemir. He is minus 225 in the comeback here. We've got Alonzo Menifield. He is plus 190. Now you got Volkan here who is, you know, high-level kickboxer, really good kickboxing. He's going to come forward. He's a pressure striker. He's going to stay in your face, look to put his opponent on that back foot, and really be comfortable with the power, you know, believing in his power that if I can land one, I'm going to put you out. And he does have durability. We can kind of back some of that. I do think his durability, especially in this fight, highly favors Oezdemir compared to Menifield. Plus, he's going to be definitely the more technical striker between these two. Now, Alonzo here, you know, he's a guy that can mix it up. You know, we've seen him. He can start to, get some wrestling going because he does have that physicality here. But overall, the guy's leaning on his power. He wants to land the big shot. He wants to look for that finish. He's going to wing his punches in there. And that's something that he's done where he's got knocked out back-to-back times. And we just definitely saw recently where he went out there and just picked up 2 wins over 2 prospects, over Umar Sy, over Julius Walker, and guys where, he just was able to put that vet win on him, was fought, kind of smart, was able to, get the victory. But overall, I mean, going back, watching those fights, I mean, absolutely terrible fights. I mean, sloppy as it gets in both situations there where, both guys on both sides, I thought didn't look good, but yet, Alonzo was able to kind of edge out the victory overall. And I think he's just sloppy. I think he's reckless when it comes to Alonzo Menifield, where you compare him to Volkan. I think Volkan is the far sharper striker. And that's kind of the issue here is where I think Volkan just has the better striking and is just far more technical, has a better process to his striking, pieces, combinations, far better together overall. We've got, Menifield, who is going to come forward, be reckless, wing big shots, big looping hooks, and he's just praying one of these haymakers land, and then that, he can find the victory on that side of it. And I just think Volkan's way too polished for a guy like Menifield at this point in his career. And I think also Menifield is just repetitive with his striking. It's very basic. It's, it's very predictable where he's coming forward, throwing these shots. I just don't really think that that's anything that Volkan can't kind of escape and then look to counter on his own. Plus, one of the biggest weapons here, I think, on the Oezdemir side is leg kicks. I think this is absolutely where he's going to go early in this fight and often in this fight, because you've seen it work pretty well against Carlos Ulberg, and Ulberg is far better of a striker than Menifield is. But I do think he's gonna be able to chop at those legs. I think that Menifield has no idea really how to check leg kicks. I think he's going to just absorb them, and that's going to slow down the movement of Menifield. It's going to also slow down or lower the power that Menifield does have. He's not going to be able to dig deep into the mat and kind of really throw those big shots. If he does, the more that he's digging in, I think that it's just going to have a big open target for Oezdemir to chop away early here. And also, I do believe the durability is going to be on the side of him as well. And I just think Menifield's just too hittable. So I do like Oezdemir here. I do think that the cardio is also going to play an effect here. You're going to be seeing Menifield start to slow down at some point. Sure, this could end early. Both these guys got the power, but I do think that Oezdemir can stay safe. And as this fight goes on, I do think that you're going to see big time slowdown on the Menifield side. I do think the knockout materializes here. So getting up the minus 225 number here, you can get Oezdemir by knockout at plus 140. I don't think that's a bad number at all here. I think it's a very high probability. I lean towards this fight going to a finish here. So I do like Oezdemir to beat Menifield. I'm just not high on Menifield. I think I couldn't be much lower on Menifield at this point here. So I'm going Volkan Oezdemir by knockout. And the last one here we're going to talk about is going to be Mekdebek Orolbai. He is minus 240 on the comeback here. I almost said Jack Della Maddalena. We've got Jack Hermansson plus 200. I'll probably do that again in this show here. But we've got Hermansson here, and Hermansson is a strong grappler who does push a nice pace, who does have some volume overall. And he's a guy that's going to, if he can get you to the ground or you're on the ground at all, the guy has really high-level submission game, high-level jiu-jitsu, and the threat is going to be there anytime that this fight does hit the mat. But there are multiple red flags here on the Hermansson side, and I think the biggest thing here, actually, there's three things here, and I think that's really why I think this line continues to get wider, and you're seeing money coming in on Orolbai here. And the first thing being is the fact that Hermansson is coming off a brutal knockout loss in June. Now, that is a quick turnaround for that type of knockout. For those who haven't seen it, you should check it out. But boy, that was a bad knockout that he took here. And now he's just coming back quickly. You're talking 5 months or so that he's coming back. I'd normally like to see fighters 8 months or more to really just heal, just get back to square one and kind of, take the time off, let the brain, heal. And I think this kind of comeback already, this kind of quick turnaround is already a bad sign. Now you add in the fact that he's turning 37 years old on this quick turnaround. That's also another layer here where he's on the wrong side of 35 at this point. He's only getting older. This is, again, two things you really don't want to put together here if you're managing Jack Hermansson. But and then the last part here is the fact that he is moving down from 185 pounds to 170 pounds for the first time in his career. Now, one of those things would already kind of be a red flag, like, oh man, he's 37, or oh man, he was just knocked out that long ago, or oh man, he's moving down, for the first time. He has all three of those things squeezed together going into this fight. And I think that is just really setting Hermansson up for terrible things on Saturday night. He was a big 185er. He's moving down. That's going to be a lot of weight that he's going to have to just lose. And, who knows how he's going to look. But I do believe he's going to look very drained. That, as we've talked about here in the show many times, is, that kind of, weight cut or those kinds of things happen. Hurts your cardio, hurts your durability. Now you got a guy who's just been knocked out, quick turnaround. Now he's squeezing down and draining his body. It's just, he's not going to be in any kind of optimal shape here. There's just no doubt about it. And I think Orolbai at this point, you've got a guy who's moving from 155 pounds to 170, but it's a different story here because he's moving up because he can't make the weight. He is whatever. I think his last fight, he was off by a ton of weight that he missed. He struggles making that weight. He's trying to cram down and a lot. And I think that just, this may be the perfect division for him and may be one of the best, Orolbais we have seen, since, entering the UFC overall. So I do think he's going to fit very nicely in this weight class. And I do think Orolbai stylistically, he's going to come forward. He's going to throw big shots. He's going to crash the pocket. He's going to test that chin of Jack. There's just absolutely no doubt. All of these things going against him. Orolbai knows if I can land one, I'm going to hurt him. Orolbai does have power. He can move forward. He is, I think at times, there can be just that relentless pressure here. But I also do think that, the pressure we've seen sometimes where there's takedowns and those kinds of things happening on Orolbai's side, there is that, he can look for takedowns. But I do think this kind of plays out on the feet more. Jack has only been taken down one time since 2019. So not many people even want to take him down. They don't want to deal with his jiu-jitsu. They kind of keep it standing. And I kind of think that's where this plays out. So I do think that Orolbai by knockout at plus 310 is a fantastic number here for all these things that he's going to have to go through to get there on fight night for Jack. I do think that Orolbai moving up, the power, I don't think the takedowns will come. I think it plays out on the feet. I do think that knockout comes. So I'm taking Mekdebek Orolbai by KO at plus 310. So there you have it for my plays for UFC Qatar. If you want to become a client, link down in the description. And again, I've got plays up already, as well as I do have that Caesars Sportsbook offer. Bet $1, get $25 profit boost instantly. It's a great offer. Check it out. Now, again, we've got 3 UFC events left in 2025. And, we're going to enjoy Thanksgiving. We're going to enjoy it. We're going to cash this weekend. We're going to enjoy Thanksgiving. We're going to relax. And then we're going to crush it at the next pay-per-view event, because I cannot wait for that one here. One of the year ender on the pay-per-view. So let's lock in. Let's get it done. See you next week. And let's cash.